Hey guys, I'm Davey Wavy, creator of the gay erotic website Himeros.tv, and today I am joined by sex and intimacy coach Finn Deerhart, intimacy coordinator LeoRising Scott, and author Matthew Clark Davison. And today we are talking about sneaky secrets in a film titled Under the Table. So let's get started. Himeros Backstage is supported by Himeros.tv. Himeros.tv is a different kind of porn site. Our videos are hot, but also grounded in better sex and authenticity. Plus, they'll give you the tools you need to increase pleasure and connection, in addition to getting you off. Himeros Backstage listeners can save 20% off any membership just by going to himeros.tv/pod. That's HIMEROS.tv/pod. Himeros.tv is like porn, but better. Sometimes when I say that, I feel like I just feel like I had a mouthful of saliva the entire, like I was just kind of like Drew Barrymoring it, like just trying to get through, like just lots of spittle. Thanks for bearing with me.
Mm-hmm. Like you're hungry.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, a very special welcome to Matthew. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, having you on the show is a recommendation of Finn, and any friend of Finn is a friend of ours.
Likewise, right? The opposite thing saying true.
Thank you. So for listeners at home, Matthew Clark Davison is the author of Doubting Thomas, which we're going to talk about today. He is creator and teacher of the lab writing classes with MCD, a non-academic school started in 2007 in a friend's living room on Douglas Street. His prose has been recently anthologized in Empty the Pews and 580 Split and published in Lambda Literacy, The Advocate, Lambda Literary, excuse me. See, the spit is coming again. The Atlantic Monthly and others, and has been recognized with a Creative Work Grant, Cultural Equities Grant, Clark Gross Award for a Novel in Progress, and a Stonewall Alumni Award. Matthew earned a BA and MFA in Creative Writing from SFSU, where he now teaches full-time. Could you throw any more acronyms in there, please?
No.
You could not. Yes.
That's the maximum.
Well, we love having storytellers on the podcast, so this is especially exciting for us. And we are going to talk about Doubting Thomas, which I'm excited about. But before we do that, the last few weeks, we've been doing this little like icebreaker round. And we have 2 questions to do a little round robin with, and also for folks at home to kind of listen and think about what their answer may be. So, Matthew, we are going to start with you since you're fresh blood on the podcast. And the question is...
Such a vampire.
The question is, what is the sexual... Oh, by the way, there's a train in your background that
Yes.
that listeners, I almost said viewers, it's a podcast, listeners will hear from time to time. But just consider another layer of texture in the conversation.
It is. It's a storytelling device.
Yeah.
Is the reason why we can afford this apartment. Is the truth.
Yeah. All right. So the question is, what is the sexual legacy you inherited from your family of origin? Yeah. I needed a definition of family of origin. I didn't really understand what that meant, and LeoRising was kind enough to give that. So if you need any more context, if you need a lifeline, it's available to you.
Thank you. No, I think
You've got it.
Biological family versus logical family, family of origin. I think that maybe things really changed in my family over time. But I think that the thing that I really, the legacy that I inherited, unfortunately, was shame about the body, and absolutely like any kind of nudity, any kind of like signs of puberty, any kind of smell, any kind of thing that was supposed to happen in the bathroom. All of that stuff was as if it didn't exist at all. And so there was like no room to talk about or acknowledge that at all when I was growing up. I think that changed eventually, but that's the legacy that I think I inherited.
Yeah. And did that, like, as you, well, okay, I guess we all have to, but you can't throw out such a juicy nugget and then not have us latch onto it. But like, how do you think that's affected you as an adult?
Well, there's a lot to unpack, and I had to, really, I wanted to be, comfortable in my body and enjoy it, and so I had to get over a lot of things. And I think that I don't know if I would have been strong enough to get over them on my own. I was placed in a lot of different situations that I was kind of forced to get over them, or at least forced to confront them. For example, living in Italy, where you absolutely could just check in the morning by talking about your bowel movement with your best friend. It was just like normal. Like it was like, oh yeah. When I was learning Italian, I imagined, because that language is in iambic pentameter. It's like this really beautifully melodic language, and so I would imagine all these romantic things that people were talking about. And I worked in a bar when I lived in Italy, and it was the kind of bar where like also old ladies came for coffee in the morning, and then once I learned Italian, I realized like what they're saying is I had a caca this morning that was yellow.
But it sounds so beautiful,
But it sounded so beautiful, and I actually think that kind of helped me get over my sort of prissy upbringing around the body and its function.
Well, maybe that's why they talk about it so much, because they have such beautiful language. It's like or like being French or something. It doesn't sound so crass as it does in fucking English.
Maybe.
LeoRising, you're next on the.
It doesn't sound crass when I talk about my shit with my loved ones.
Okay.
Was that because you're smiling? So
Was that a question?
I
Was that
was-
a question or a statement?
No, I was raised to just be like that was something we talked about our poop. The girls talked about their periods and like body fluids, and that way we're okay. I've been mulling over this because I think I did not make a connection that it said sexual legacy until today. I was thinking about relational legacies. Like that's how I immediately received it and processed it, and then I was like, all right. But now I'm like, ooh, sexual legacy. This is gonna sound really horrible it's my first time coming to it, and it's like not prepared. Dullness. My family would like to gloss over the fact that people are attractive, and quite often have a sexuality to them, so that the entire family like dulls their sexual presence. Everybody, significant others, everything. It's very dull and like buttoned up, and it's like then there's like cousins or sibling with like 4 babies, and you don't really notice the chemistry between the partner because everyone's always dull. And I've worked against that. I'm still working against that. Like there are still ways in which I won't. I don't want to say I won't, but there's ways in which I have to like really seek coaching if I'm preparing for a performance, where I'm going to allow myself to be aroused and to be witnessed in that arousal. I have to like really prepare for it and compartmentalize it, where like it's like not natural to be that way. Like my family just doesn't. We don't. No one's ever like, hey, you're sexy, or like you're gonna get somebody tonight. Like that's never been exchanged. So it's a little dull.
Yeah. Finn?
I am just kind of thinking that, punishment. I got my mouth washed out with soap for saying the word sex, like multiple times, which is why I do the work that I do. So I got whipped with a belt for it. Yeah, I was riffing off of, I guess, like this dullness, and also what Matthew was saying about shame about the body, that like what the body wants and does is to be ruled over and managed into the basement.
That is interesting, though, that you literally get your mouth washed out with the word for saying the word sex, and like, and that this is the work that you do. Like, it makes total sense.
I'm still trying to get that soap out.
Yeah, but also like, like your dad was really just planting seeds, But for my family, I guess it's actually kind of similar to what you guys all collectively are saying. There was a lot of just kind of like silence, like the like no one talked about sex. Again, ironic because that's all I talk about now. Like I'm overcorrecting, but I felt like the sister to silence is kind of like shame. Not talking about something, ironically, is talking about it. Like it's sending a message, and it. I don't know, like the thing that I deeply desired was dirty and bad, and especially because what I desired was twisted, which was like sex with guys. It was like even a worse version of what they already weren't saying. So a lot of shame, and whatever shame I didn't get from my family, I got through Catholic schools, Catholic religious programming, all that stuff that I was a part of. And so just to bring it full circle, the work that I do now is an effort to replace that shame with joy, both in other people and myself. So, all right, question number 2. What is one aspect, I like this because it's such a different direction. What is one aspect of our sexual culture that you'd change if you could? Yeah, so Matthew, you want to start us with that?
Yeah, I thought about this and I came up with a variety of different things came to mind, but I think that the thing that all of the things that came to my mind had in common was misogyny. It was like this way in which I grew up seeing women completely objectified. And I always related, I think that I was gender nonconforming as a kid, absolutely. I mean, I didn't know what the language was around that. But I did not think of myself as a boy. I mean, I had 2 brothers. And my mom and I were part of the same team, and my brothers and my father were part of the same team in my own head, in my imagination. And I related to them. I related to Wonder Woman. I related to Bionic Woman. I related to Daisy Duke, without knowing what all of the troubling things were about some of those people and shows and what have you. But just like I was hooked into like kind of the glamour and the power aspect of femininity. But I think that what I was seeing in my neighborhood, in my town, in the Catholic Church, etc., was that with that kind of Madonna whore binary. And I do feel like the particular kind of homophobia that made me really afraid of my body, and also probably led to me making some choices that were really probably not very good for my psyche at the time, was that it wasn't really like the homophobia that I endured was really connected to misogyny, because it was a punishment for how other people perceived me as being feminine versus any sexual experience that I might have had. Or I was really good at not saying the things that I wanted out loud at that time. I was born in 1970, and so it was a matter of survival. But I did feel like I was mostly so much of the things that I ended up having to get over in order to have a good sex life were really related to misogyny. So I think that would be it. And I think there's so many directions to go with that one.
LeoRising?
Mm-hmm.
Let me process Matthew's answer.
Well, this is a podcast. Empty space doesn't...
You know what? People keep saying that, and then they pay me a lot of money to help them meditate, so they can sit and they can wait.
Yeah. They're going to change the channel, girl. They're going to see what helps us out.
No, that was just such a gorgeous answer. I don't ever... Oh, gosh. Changing society.
Well, sexual culture.
Changing... I mean... The flip side of it, right, is because of the view of femininity that misogyny has. It praises the performative nature of womanhood or feminine aspect, and then it also praises it because it can control it. So with that praise comes a sense of control, right? And children don't get to express themselves. There's a whole non-binary aspect of expression that is suppressed the entire time. So the only thing I'd want to change is if listening to youth, like listening to a child sedate. This is how I am a princess today. Accept it. This could last for 3 months. I'm going to be a princess for 3 months. I'll change my mind and be a turtle when I want to be a turtle, and just let them be a turtle. Just leave it alone until the body naturally starts producing the hormone regulation and the personality and the id starts to come. Just leave it alone. That's the only thing I still seek to change. Is just leave kids alone. Not forcing into a box at that stage, because by the time you're 17, 19, 22, like, what is there left to change? You're just going to either rebel or you're going to fall in line. So it has to be really early. It has to be early.
Thank you.
I love it. I love these juicy answers. Yeah. And I'm with you, LeoRising. I want to process it too, just hang out. Just like sit in the beauty of it.
It was a great answer.
Are you done?
It's my turn. I think for me, it would be something about like taking sex out of a space that humans have uniquely carved into a compartment and bringing it into an integrated kind of space and how we are as beings, like bringing it away, less sex and more eroticism, I would say. So like I use this metaphor a lot. Like I look out my window when I'm working with clients a lot, and I look at like trees and like flowers out front, and it's just like there is no separation. And I think sometimes there's a conflation of like more sex equals sex positivity, and that might be true for somebody actually, but it also might be self-harm for somebody else. And I think in the gay culture, there's this like heavy promotion around a certain like way of being as a sexual person. So I have succumbed to that in my own, like I have like FOMO, or I don't know, like I've just been through a lot of different phases in my life, and I think I'm coming around to a kind of integration in myself and what that looks like for me. And I think that's what I would want to change for everybody, is like having it more integrated and less like in little compartments, and that maybe sex as a behavior isn't always what we're after, but an erotic expression can take on all kinds of forms.
Yeah. Yesterday I was on a Zoom call with the director that we're going to be working with on an upcoming project, and he was talking about the relationship that sex has with like the time of day. And he was like, do you think people just have sex at night because like it's dark and there's lots of shadows, and like they can go into their room and close the door and like not see themselves or the sex that they're having because it's like so deeply rooted in shame? So that feels like one possibility. When I read this question, though, I thought when it said sexual culture, I kind of took that as a synonym for like gay culture, which kind of a different direction. But in gay culture, the thing that I would change is meanness, and I don't, not like Miranda Priestley and like Devil Wears Prada mean, but like, or angry mean. There's just this like, it's almost hard to describe, but this meanness that comes from being scared or broken, like a defense mechanism meanness that I see a lot among gay men. Like 4 years ago, I was at a gay porn conference just after I had launched Himeros TV, and it was pretty much all gay men, like the whole conference. And people that like I know would like pretend like they don't see you, or they would like ignore you because like, because what if they said hi and you didn't wave back, or like there was just so much ego, which was to say that there was like so much insecurity and like so much pain in that room.
Wait, was this a porn conference, or was this a literary conference?
Because
oh my god.
Well, can you imagine how much more it would be at a porn conference where like the currency that people are like, trading in is appearance and like social media clout, and I don't know, like those are not indicators of someone who's healthy and happy and well adjusted. I don't know. It's like we're all gay men. Like we're in the same tribe together. Like we're in this together. It's not like I'm a Republican entering this space. Like let's like show some support for one another.
Oh my god.
Yeah. What?
You said Republican, and I just thought of something. It's going to be a gear shift, though.
Do it. Sure. Switch the gear.
Do you know that? Well, my dad actually might come visit me in California, which is big news.
He's going to go to your house?
Oh, he's not going to stay in my house because I'm a false teacher, quote unquote. but like I haven't seen my dad in like, I saw him at my brother's wedding a few years ago, and then before that, we didn't talk for years, and into this idea about like culture too. I've been like thinking a lot about how do we like even start to talk about the polarization in the country, and like talking in values and people and like them and us, and then I'm like in that conversation a lot from a real lofty kind of place. But then in my own family, there's this really marked division between me and my father. And it's just like, I don't know how to like visit this person and like where to start. And I just kind of like, oh, I guess I don't really have to know right now. I'm going to just start and see what happens out of that situation.
Does it feel like healthy and safe for him to be in your life in a bigger capacity? Yeah.
It does. I've been in therapy for 6 years. I think I'm ready for this coffee date with my dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you and him.
Yeah.
He wants to come on the podcast, right?
Well,
What?
I wish.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you for all those juicy answers, everyone. That was fun. Matthew, let's talk about you and your book, Doubting Thomas, which Finn has read it. Admittedly, I have not. I did listen to the podcast that you were on. What was the podcast called? Queer Spirit. Yeah. Yes. So, for our audience, can you kind of set up the premise of the book, because it's pretty unique.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and Finn, please jump in if, from a reader's standpoint, you might have a different perspective on this. But
Okay.
the book starts with this guy Thomas McGurran, who's in his late 30s, early 40s, and he's a beloved member of Portland, Oregon's like liberal so-called elite, and I'm using air quotes on cam for folks that are listening, because they have money, and he teaches at a school that cost $60,000 in 2013 for a kindergartner, and so he is a beloved member of this community. And one day, a kid in his class, and this all happens in the first chapter, so there's no spoilers in what I'm saying. A kid comes into his classroom, and his pants fall down, and he's this kid that freezes every time like all of the attention is turned on him, and Thomas helps lift up. He's froze, and so Thomas went over and helped him pick up his pants. He's an out gay guy that even did his thesis in his master's degree in education on being out in the classroom, and part of the ethos of that particular school was that they wanted diversity, and so they hired him partially because he was an out gay guy. And the kid goes home and says, Thomas touched my pants. And this launches an investigation and then gets him fired, even though they find him absolutely innocent of wrongdoing. And the governing boards of the school make him leave, which is all kind of based on something that either happens in real life and an anecdote that happened in my real life that I witnessed. Luckily, it had nothing to do with me, but it was something that I witnessed. And also, I was working with this other completely different thread after having finished Justin Torres's novel. It's a thin novel with big ideas called We the Animals. I thought about what it was like to grow up the queer one of 3 boys in a family. And I left home at a really young age. I left home when I was 15, and my brother had left a little bit before me, and my younger brother was 10 when I left. And so I was sort of imagining into what Justin's characters would have happened to them had they grown up. And you see a tiny bit of that, but I kept lingering on what their adult relationships were like. And I was fascinated by how the adult relationships with my brother in my life had evolved over the years after they started having children. And so I wanted to write about that too, and I think that I needed a situation that thrust Thomas back into his family in a way where the stakes were really high. And so his losing his job combined with his younger brother's cancer diagnosis were those two things. But really the novel is about, in my opinion, some of the questions that I was sort of pondering at the time of writing it was during the Obama's first administration, and there was talk about us being post-race because we had a president with brown skin, and gay marriage was passing in a couple of states, and people were saying, oh, homophobia. I literally had friends who were straight that were like, is homophobia still a thing? You know, and so that made me really, really nervous, and so I was putting a lot of anxieties in that. But really, it's a family story about a bad year in a guy's life to see what's going to happen as a result.
Can you talk about the real life situation that you kind of mentioned that this was based on something that you saw?
Sure. I was invited to visit a school once in a professional capacity, and I was accompanying a bunch of people into a fourth grader's classroom, and the teacher of that class was an out gay guy who, after the class was over, one of the people that was on the visiting team said that he witnessed the guy touching a student inappropriately. And the administrator in charge asked all of these really intense follow-up questions, like, when you say that, you know that we're mandatory reporters, and so if something happens, so what do you mean inappropriately? Like, what part of the teacher's body touched what part of the student's body? And it turned out that the person who was, by the way, when we all left, I saw the person who said this, who's a nice person. Like, I'm telling you, he's a person with very positive qualities as far as I know him. I don't know him super well. But I remember he had an Obama bumper sticker on the back of the car that he drove out of the parking lot with after the whole ordeal was over. But essentially all he could say was he was really flamboyant and he touched the child's shoulders. And I had witnessed the situation. It was basically like a kid was they were all lining up to go and do a different activity and switch classes. And one of the kids kept going to the back, and the teacher just put his hands gently on the child's shoulders and geared him back into the line. Something that happens thousands of times a day in classrooms that aren't led by out gay people. And yet somehow in the mind of this witness, it became inappropriate. And when I started doing research, I was terrified. First, like, did I not witness something and was the kid in trouble? Then I was terrified for the teacher's job. And then I became like mortified thinking about all of the people who are touched inappropriately or kids who are being abused. And maybe they're not believed because it's not the kind of pariah where like a gay person can get conflated with a child molester in a way that can keep like a person with status in the community from seeming like a child molester because they might be married to a woman or they might hold a position of prominence or something. So I kind of like went through 3 levels of terror around that whole thing. And this was in a very, very, very maximally liberal environment. And this person also came from historically marginalized communities and was making those conflations. So I'm thinking, if that's happening here, what else is happening in our culture that's not being discussed?
I feel like a lot of those stereotypes, like those tropes, are laying dormant, that we kind of put this like facade over them. This is something that I'm like hyper aware of, this like linking of pedophilia to homosexuality, that like I feel guilty even when I haven't done anything wrong. Like I don't let myself get into situations where like I'm alone with kids because like not only am I gay, I'm a porn producer, like, you know, like I'm over sexualized. My sister has kids, and my niece was visiting. She was in the kitchen at her house, and she pushed me, and she's like 6 or 7 years old. She pushed me. When she pushed me, she pushed against my dick, like through my pants, like through my underwear. She pushed me, and she goes, like speaks out loud. She goes, "Oh, I touched Uncle Davey's pee-pee." And I called my sister because I was like, oh my God, she could go home and start saying like, I touched Uncle Davey's pee-pee, you know, and then what are people going to think? And some of these kind of like stereotypes that are lying dormant but alive, they're just like waiting for someone. It feels to me it's like waiting for someone to kind of just like add a little bit of water, or even just like a suggestion to kind of bring them up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It totally makes sense, and it absolutely breaks my heart for you because I've had that exact same situation where it's just like my role is to be like the world's best gunkle, and what is happening instead is I'm in my head thinking about my sister-in-law's religious stuff, the fact that I don't know her siblings, everybody's there. I'm known as the out gay person, yada yada, and every single solitary school teacher that's an out gay queer person that I interviewed is terrified. Like kids will run up and squeeze them, and like maybe their head will rest against their crotch, and the like literally like one of the people that I interviewed was like I put my arms up in the like my it was almost as if like somebody had a gun to my back, and you know, I interviewed a lot of people, and sadly, so many of us, and I wasn't surprised to find out that people from my generation, I'm 51, had all experienced this, but I heard it from people who were in their 40s and their 30s and their 20s. They don't feel comfortable even with their own siblings' children because of this conflation of queerness and pedophilia.
Wow. There's, as the book develops, there's some, I understand, some spicy scenes that unfold, some sex scenes that you wrote. Interesting, you had mentioned that your mom proofread it.
Yes.
Speaking of legacies, sexual legacies from family, was that uncomfortable? How did that go?
Well, I think it was uncomfortable for me, but I'll tell you something interesting that relates back to the first question. So I left home when I was 15. It took me, and Finn, you and I can talk about my reunion with my dad that took place years later. But so after I left home, one of the conversations that I had with my mom, when I confirmed that I was queer to her, I had already left home, and I came back for this reason, and I told her I have a boyfriend. It was how I came out to her. And she got mad at me, which really surprised me because she had been so supportive in so many other ways. And it was so obvious by then that I was queer. And she was just like, you're trying to complicate your life. And I remember saying to her, and I was mad, and I wasn't trying to be funny. I said, you're just mad because I did it first, because you and Dad want the same thing, and that's a woman who plays golf. And I had always like, picked up on this like les vibe from my mom. Like I was a little mini drag queen as a kid, and she didn't even have like the chapstick with a tint in it. It was literally like that black one that you couldn't even pretend that you were putting pigment on your lips. There wasn't a single solitary scratch of makeup. Like one time I found a lip gloss on my paper route sitting in a snowbank in Massachusetts where my parents moved when I was 10 years old. And I felt like the queer gods had rained upon. I was just like, yes! Because there's nothing to find in my family. But years later, she did end up falling in love with a woman and was with her for many years. And I think that because my mom was she went into a convent when she was very young, at 12 years old. And then, she sort of went into her marriage with my father, which lasted 30 years on and off, more as off as on. They had a very tumultuous marriage. But then when she finally decided to divorce my dad, she met and fell in love with a woman. And she went through a phase where she would come to San Francisco, and it was literally like looking in the rearview mirror of the car where she and Peg were in the back seat. For a small period of time, for understandable reasons, they were like the human pretzel. It was just like steamy back there. And so I think that she got over a lot of those things in the meantime. But now I can't remember what the question was. Oh, she was reading my book. And I was just like,
she got over them, but you might have still had some baggage around her reading it.
Right. In my husband's in my apartment, like I can be doing dishes and watching her from this chair that's right next to me. And she kept telling me where she was at in the book while she was proofing it. And I was just like, oh, okay, we're coming up on the rim scene. Like here we go with rimming and anal. And she's my mom, and she's 79. And so I said something like in kind of like my gay Gemini jokey way to like break the tension. And she turned around in the swivel chair that we have, and she was just like, my friend called me up after reading an excerpt on The Advocate and asking, is the whole thing going to be this sexual? Thomas's humanity comes through in his sex scenes. This is like she completely defended the necessity for this sex scene and felt like I was definitely the one being the prude. So it was just like I did think about like my nieces who were all like 15, 17, 21 and whatever, like reading those excerpts, but not enough to stop me.
Yeah.
From writing.
Yeah, if they have the internet, they know what a rim job is. They're not going to be.
Oh God, Davey.
You know what? I can listen to that without breaking into a sweat. I really can.
I love though that your mom was not just, she was like, this rimming scene is not just beautiful, it's necessary.
It's necessary. It's essential.
The two comments that my editor made to me upon meeting him were he thought that the novel in the manuscript form was ready to go as I gave it to him, but he was just like, It could be angrier and it could be queerer. And those were the two comments that, even though I had been in a lot of schooling and a lot of workshops, even with gay people, I didn't know that those were the two critical comments that I had been waiting my whole life to hear. So he had editorial reasons that have to do with like the deeper story, that he felt like the sex scenes needed to be drawn out in particular ways that I really agreed with. It was fun.
So when you started writing, you were kind of like something of like a street poet, an activist. Like now your work is considered like literature. So when you write about sex now, is it different knowing that it's like quote unquote, literature versus like, like do you approach it differently?
If you ever want to read a novel by somebody that is recognized sort of universally in the literary world as a writer of fine literature, Garth Greenwell wrote a novel called Cleanness that has scenes in it that are so sexual and so disturbing in such a good way that if I live to be 100 years old, I will never forget this one sex scene in that book. And so and also Mary Gateskill is one of my absolute favorite writers, and she's somebody that uses sex and sexuality in such extremely graphically described ways in her book that it makes me look like I have so much aspiration to do if I want to write great sex and literature in the future. And Garth Greenwell did with other folks a whole course on sex and literature that I would have loved to have taken. But so it's not like I'm breaking through myself, but I do think that there is sort of this idea that there's a way to portray sex in superficial ways, and then there's this like deep way of doing it in literary ways, and I kind of think that these are just snobby. I don't necessarily think that. I think a certain editor might say no to that sex because they think, oh God, is this going to sell to this audience or that? But I actually think that so many people have broken through that that we should all just be writing whatever illuminates our character's humanity. And in my particular novel, his sex life is really, really relevant.
Yeah, that's fun. I love that. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about Under the Table, but Finn or LeoRising, do you guys have anything you want to add before we get to the video?
LeoRising.
You first, Finn.
Well, I love what Matthew was just saying about, and I've actually read the Greenwell book, and I feel like there were some scenes in there that really stuck with me, and then some of it I thought like, there's more to tell here. Like there's more to tell, and for me personally, when I'm reading about sex, I wonder like, is it being written to like, I don't know, like what's being left out, like what part of like disgust factor, ambivalence, because all these things are happening even in the best sex, and those things are so hard to find in sex that I've read in literature. It's like to some sort of like erotic fantasy end versus it being like exposed the animal fully. I don't know. That's just my take. And that does actually intersect with the video today, so I'll hold my peace now and come back to that. Yeah. LeoRising, what about?
I'm interested in... I'm now going to purchase this book so I can read it. But I'm interested in character development. So you had mentioned some of the interviews that you had based on the particular case. And from what I'm aware of, this character also has a family member that's not well, right? And so it's a mapping of a whole year, which is we can all relate to. The hope of being able to tell a story like that, whether it be in novel or in film, is you get the full lived aspect of this person, not just the nuance. You understand every ingredient of their daily circumstances and what they can extrapolate and what they're suffering from and what breaks off that from their past that's now confronted. And this topic actually is like giving my spine chills because it's so confronting for our culture as gay bisexual men. Everyone's always afraid of being shamed for their sexual presence, and then it being conflated with something problematic, abusive, or defaming, or just frankly a pure violation. Like pedophilia is a pure violation. But the proximity of that to desiring the same sex or or wild sex is it's a large distance. Like, it's such a jump. And to write something that is, when you went into it, did you say, like, I'm going to be an advocate for this not being true for my community? Or did you go into it wanting to just tell this man's story? And in telling this man's story, this is a vehicle that helps this person reclaim not only their personal autonomy, but reclaim a large aspect of presence and reliability and safety that many other gay, bisexual teachers, particularly male teachers, are offering in the world. I look back when you were mentioning your age. There are plenty of teachers I had in middle school and in high school. We had an experience called the Gay Straight Alliance, and you couldn't start a Gay Straight Alliance without a faculty member willing to be present as a chaperone. And I went to the teachers that I spiritually and optically were like, I know, sis, I see you. And they all said no, because they came from a generation where you don't say you're that thing, and you definitely don't say you're that thing around boys. You understand? Like, they're saying no actually was tied to them defending themselves because they didn't want any sort of awkward attention. And, a problematic person will say, well, if you're worried about it, you have it in your system. And that's not true. You're worried about it because it's used as a vehicle to ruin entire lives, to ruin entire careers. And we're worried about it because it's a very serious violation that needs to be observed, documented, and destroyed when it's actually done, right? So this is a really confronting book that I'm now excited to consume. Like, I want to know this story, but I'm really intrigued. What was the genesis of building this for you?
Oh my God, there's so many things happening here. I can't wait to talk
I'm a
about
lot,
the
sorry.
No. It's what I really want to say, though, LeoRising, and also, to you, Davey, and Finn, is that, like, this level of intelligence and engagement is so sexy in and of itself. It's just, like, so it's stimulating, right? So I appreciate it. I just hope I can do it justice. And I do absolutely want to talk about the video. Here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to try to say. I failed at performing masculinity, and so I was unable to put myself in places because of when I was born and where I was that were free and natural to me. And so I ended up finding a place where I could be free and natural, and for me that was San Francisco. What I didn't expect was the AIDS pandemic, and to watch my friends die of AIDS in the way that I did, because I was so young when I left home, and because the demographic that was dying was just a little bit older than me, and that's who my friends were. And so I did achieve a certain amount of freedom from all of the bullshit because of the restaurant business, because of these incredible people that I was able to meet along the way, who really helped deprogram me along the way in thinking about myself and other people in a much, much broader and more celebratory terms. But then when AIDS happened, and that was so clearly linked to sex and sex expression, I felt like I had just liberated parts of my brain and my spirit, and then it was sort of shut down again. And then, so when I was writing the book, I was less interested in my own story and more interested in the price that people pay for assimilating, for being able to pull that off. Thomas was such a good boy. Every step of the way, he dotted every I and crossed every T and made himself so vanilla and so palpable to his community that they didn't have to reckon with him as a sexual being at all. In fact, he struggled to relate to gay men outside of sex. He was good at sex and enjoyed it, but a lot of the sex scenes in the book are like kind of botched sex, like his misreading other people's signals and then going for it, and then he respects boundaries, but they're like, hey, no, that's not what I'm because I love what a botched sort of sex scene with consensual adults reveals about a character, like when you make yourself vulnerable and you don't get your needs met. What does that reveal about you and stuff like that? Like very uncomfortable things I'm really interested in portraying. And so I was completely interested in what happens to the spirit of a human being who is in his family, in his community, at his job, not like us, because I think all of us are sort of outside of what our families, a Catholic church, in my case too, Davey, may have expected from us, but what do people that do it all and happen to be gay, like, where are they? And I wanted to burst the bubble that Thomas thought that his privilege, his enabled to pass, his money, his status as a cis white man got him in that community.
His palatability, yeah.
All of that. I was just like, well, what will happen if we pop that? And that's what I wanted to explore.
Yeah. Yeah, when I bought my house in Rhode Island, my neighbors came over and she brought her kids over and they're running around my house and she's like, "Oh, I'm just so excited that you bought this house because we were really afraid it was going to be some pervert." And then and I'm like unpacking my nudes, like my nude drawings and stuff. I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then her kids.
You've got like some editing material up.
Yeah, like the porn shoot is starting in like 4 hours. Which for sure I'm going to shoot porn at the house. And her kids come running up from my basement and they saw my YouTube play button. I have like a gold button that you get when you hit 1 million subscribers. And they're like, "Are you a YouTuber?" And I was like, "Yeah, I make YouTube videos sometimes." And the mom was like, "What are they about?" And I was like, let's talk later.
That's good.
So I texted her afterwards and she's like, "It's too late, girl." She's like, "They saw your name on it. You've already been Googled." I was like, "Oh, jeez." Wow. Well, there you go. So anyway, all right. So I do want to chat about this week's video, but also one more thing to add to what you were talking about, like the rim job scene. I was kind of chuckling to myself because, you can do this explicit rim job and it's considered literature. And yet if you filmed a literal version of that, it would be considered porn. That like the movie version of it would have to be so heavily censored. It's like the difference between Call Me by Your Name book and Call Me by Your Name movie. That like it is interesting, right? That you can read it and picture it in your mind's eye and that's okay. Yeah. But if you see it with your literal eye, there's a distinction that's made there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. And John Cameron Mitchell tried to remember Short Bus?
Yeah.
Did you all see
yeah.
that?
Oh my God, I love Short Bus.
Yeah. Trying to make those things, the same. And so many artists are, including, I would include today's film that's up for discussion, like trying to break down these barriers.
All right. Well, this week's video is titled "Under the Table." This is a Finn Deerhart original featuring Alex Foe and Gabriel Cross. This is part of our Through the Looking Glass collection, and we filmed this on location in a French castle, no expenses spared. The scene opens with an opulent, indulgent feast of French pastries and cakes. Gabriel's at the table with a few friends, which include Finn and myself, and we're passing around eclairs and macaroons and all sorts of delicious treats, and it's like, it almost looks like we're like in Versailles, like complete with like the paneled walls and a massive crystal chandelier and art of all these dead people on the walls who are just kind of judging us from the afterlife. And anyway, so in the midst of our kind of excitement, this naked twink kind of slides in along the floor and goes under the table and works his way through our feet to Gabriel so that all the rest of the participants are totally unaware of what's happening. And he blows Gabriel under the table, and because he's quite flexible, I was very impressed with this. He managed to slide his hole around Gabriel's cock and milks a load out of him and then jerks off onto the carpet, and all the while the rest of us are completely oblivious whilst we stuff our face holes. So Finn, what was your intention in this video?
I really wanted to
Yeah, right, okay.
How can I get into this? No. I would say there's like two threads that started this particular concept for me. I wanted to play with the tension of like what's going on beneath the surface. Kind of what I was talking about earlier, like what I would change about culture and sexuality. It's like, maybe two people are at a table, having a date or something, and the conversation is like on one level, but really under the table, so-and-so is trying to be smarter than the other, or someone's trying to get control of the situation, or, whatever. And sex is that way. It's like such a shadow game that pleasure is what's being had on the surface, but beneath that is a vie for some sort of validation that could be all the way back to when you're 6 or something. So I wanted that to have tension there, and I wanted there to be humor in that too, so that we were just like playing and it being, back and forth. And then the other part for me personally, because a lot of the concepts that I write have some sort of like personal seed in them. When I was a kid, I think I might have talked about this on here. Like when I was younger, I was heavy, and people called me fat faggot at one phase of my life at school, and that was like a really hard thing to shake, and it's still something that kind of arises for me, with like body issues. And when I first came out of the closet, I had a boyfriend who knew the fat faggot story, and we were at a party, and it was really boring, and there was a cake there, and we ended up with some cake downstairs, and I was sucking his dick and sucking this chocolate fudge off of his dick, and it was so good. And he looked down at me, and he's like, "See, baby, you really are a fat faggot." And it was just, we both started laughing, and it felt like a very liberating moment where I could go, I'm so proud of being gay. Like, it was one of the first times in my life that I just kind of paused and acknowledged that for myself. So I made this like inextricable link between cake and sucking dick. And so that was part of what I was thinking too when I wrote this, is just the unabashed joy in the gluttony of sucking cock. And yeah,
we were all fat faggots around that table that day. Mm-hmm. LeoRising, was it?
Are you on an edible?
No.
You're like you have these like new radio intonations, and I'm listening to you today. And I'm like, is he hot?
No, I'm not. I wish I was. I can't do the podcast.
I'm not.
Side.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. So I'm just saying, keep it up. I like the vibe.
I like it when Davey's high on the podcast, by the way.
I could do it again, but someone else would have to take the reins, because I can't. I have no sense of time, any of that. It all goes out the window. So LeoRising, was it more fun for you to watch the sex, or the fact that Finn was pounding down processed sugar?
Which you wouldn't buy something that says processed sugar, unfortunately.
I will say that I thought I was inventing hearing you guys talk, and I thought I wasn't okay until I saw it on screen that you were actually at the table.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, are these girls talking right now? Like, it was throwing me off, because it was coming in and coming out, and then I was like, is this a camera trick? I was like, I don't know. But there's the temperature of the castle. Is that a post? Is that a post edit of this like smoke coming off, or was it that cold?
The steam was so steamy.
There's steam. There's like legit.
It's that cold, brother.
That stuck out.
Yeah.
To a lot of people, there were comments about that. Finn, how cold was the castle? What was the temperature?
Let me tell you, I loved being on set for these. I was so cranky all week long. I could not get over how cold I felt. Like, I was so cold. I didn't know how the models were doing what they were doing. And then Davey kept being like, it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Was it cold outside, or was there a ghost?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, just checking.
No, there was like ice in the mornings. It was like...
Yeah, it was
horrible.
35 to 40 degrees inside the castle, Fahrenheit. So...
Yeah, all day long, with no respite.
Because it's a stone castle.
It was just cold,
so
cold,
we had
cold,
industrial
cold.
heaters. So what we would do is we'd heat, in between takes, we would heat the room probably up to like 55, 60 degrees. And then...
Oh my God.
Like a flamethrower.
Yeah, and it would bring the temperature down. And then we'd start it up again. So we filmed it in kind of like 10-minute intervals. So yeah, no, but that steam coming off the dick, the steam coming out of their mouths, like it was great atmosphere. It looks like magic, but it was just really...
It's beautiful. Yeah. That was really beautiful. It was high art house. Like, it was like elevated. Yeah. It was elevated cinematography. And I just kept thinking, I was like, this needs to be its own separate price. I don't think this should be on the membership.
You pay extra.
You should pay extra.
For this. Yeah. Well, the pastry budget alone. So.
Oh my God! I was thinking about that later, like the pastry budget, and then I also was thinking, for some reason I had an association when I was thinking about it later, not when I was experiencing it, but like the early cycles of America's Next Top Model, when when Tyra would be like, you need to be willing to do anything. I was on a shoot with Steven Meisel, and he made me blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking about that, but also, you know what was really interesting for me the first time I was experiencing it, in addition to the steam, which I found so fascinating and wonderful, like magical is the right word, was that like a gay signal in the era that comes right before mine was the ascot. So I didn't know until I was watching, I think, Finn, you were one of the people, and I can't remember who the other person was, that had like neck scarves on above the table. And to me, that was like the most erotic aspect of it, was that's
what we were going for.
Wearing a scarf at the dinner table. To me, there's something very hot about reinventing the ascot. That I kind of grew up with that like sort of tucked in tie being like the gay guy on TV.
The concealed
the
neckline is just so alluring.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love
last bit.
Yeah.
I thought what Finn potentially could have written, or what you wrote. I looked at this as this director and this team really got what you wrote. This is really clean execution. It was very nice.
Yeah. I just.
Thank you for that. I love Ed.
Ed's the director for this. I just love this visual of me being like behind the camera, being like yelling at the models, telling them to like, it's not that cold. Back in my day, the Tyra Banks comparison.
Yeah. He's like, it's not.
Yeah, that was not happening.
All the time. I'm like, this is not helping us be convinced otherwise. Like, I like chattering my teeth. I will say, I feel like it's such a blessing just to be able to work with Ed every time I get the opportunity. The director. I mean, just it's
his heart and soul is into it. You know what I was thinking though, that it would have been fun to film like an alternate ending for this, like because it does kind of just come to this conclusion that like they come and whatever, but it would have been kind of funny if there was a moment at the end where we just like there's a recognition that we knew what was happening all along, like we're like, okay, are we done, like that this whole thing was a scene that was set up to fulfill Alex's fantasy or Gabriel's fantasy, or there could have been some twist ending, M. Night Shyamalan moment, that happened.
I thought it was pretty M. Night Shyamalan, because isn't the ending is that it didn't happen? Like, because his pants are back on and he's going for another piece of cake. Isn't that how it ends? Or did my video reloop?
Oh, I think it just like fades to black after the cum. The old fade to black moment. I don't know. So Finn writes on this video, being under the table is a metaphor for the subconscious. He is most fulfilled being hidden. He has more permission because he is out of sight and in a world beneath the judgment of others. Matthew, I'm curious, do you relate more to the guys seated at the table, or are you the cum slut underneath? Which do you relate to?
You know what? I really think that, as a Gemini, I can claim both. I think that there's a part of me that I actually think that both simultaneously is the human experience, right? It's just like what our private inner lives are happening simultaneously with how it is that we're presenting ourselves publicly. There's always that sort of above the table, below the table metaphor. And then also this sort of sometimes in this particular video, something good is happening below the table and something seemingly good is happening above the table, even though I did feel that by the end, even though I haven't eaten refined sugar myself in like 17 years, I did feel like I had diabetes by the end of that shoot. But that sort of pleasure and indulgence that might be happening on the top of the table might be different from what we have going on in our heads. And then also the highly erotically charged secrecy about like nobody else knowing at the table. Also that sort of private thing. I don't know. There's something about that that I felt like was really interesting, really compelling. And so I almost felt like it was, you could assert yourself into any one of or all of the positions throughout the video and imagine that part of your own humanity.
Yeah, and being above the table.
Also the music, something. I don't know. I don't want to be the one to talk about it, but what about the music?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
Opulent.
It was good music.
Yeah, it was like a full orchestra. Like, it was everything.
Was it stock music, or did someone, was it stock sounds?
Well, do we have to call it stock?
I think so.
The sound just sounds so...
That's what it's called.
Sounds so like vulgar. It's just, you know, like it was not written exclusively for this.
It's like Baroque, like
Yeah.
stuff.
It was
yeah.
no, it was a beautiful choice, and someone still had to put it together. I really appreciated
Yeah,
it.
yeah. But being under the table, being above the table, each could be equally constructive or destructive, like the gluttony above, the gluttony below. So, okay, wait. So under the table, Matthew, because you didn't really answer my question. When you're under the table, what are you really
did.
like?
You totally answered the question.
What's the under the table you versus the on this very public podcast?
He's asking for
Yeah,
a revelation. Yeah.
Like, okay, so for example,
I don't feel even 1% resistant. I'm just waiting for something to surface.
okay,
Let's see.
like the real.
Tell me the question one more time.
So the real me, the under the table me, is me like in sweatpants, stoned, like eating cake, watching a shitty like action movie in my living room. Like that's the under the table me. Yeah.
But I guess I experience. I hear what you're saying. But the way that I'm really relating it to the video itself, I hope I'm not being a problem guest. Is that
Swats.
I didn't
Swats.
think I liked what he was. I felt like he was taking care of business. He was getting what he needed.
Yeah.
He didn't want what was on top of the table, and so he was finding what he needed underneath. And so I didn't.
We're all
think
filling our
of-
holes.
Right. Everybody is filling whatever hole they want in the video, and so to me, though, I felt like he crawled across the floor. It reminds me of Madonna saying, "I crawled across that floor and licked in the milk out of that
cat bowl.
dish." Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I felt like, to me, in my viewing, he had complete agency and was doing something that he chose to do. But I know what you mean. Like, what part of me is that? Is that kind of oh God, there's so many. It's a bag of potato chips every night. There's so many different ways that I could just being bitter about humanity, that kind of internal private life that might be contrasting with me putting a good face on at the party.
Well, before we wrap this up, I do want to read a couple comments. D-Man89 says, hands down, one of my favorite videos in Himeros. There's just so much that I love. 1, a big table full of sweets. 2, cameo appearances from Davey and Finn. 3, the set. 4, the cute boy under the table, ready to suck and ride and eclair. 5, did anyone else love the hot air radiating from Alex? 6, the humping and coughing that led to the nonchalant I'm choking from Gabriel. For me, the sex was hot, but there was also so much indulgence to it. The entire video was walking into my favorite bakery or chocolate shop. Alex and Gabriel were the centerpiece with numerous tantalizing treats, and I wanted to go in and awe and sample. Excellent work. As a Catholic, like as not anymore, but obviously someone that was raised Catholic, I was told that the way to honor God was to abstain from God's creation. So like, don't have sex, don't eat this, don't jerk off. It just personally, it resonates more with me that like the best way to celebrate God is to enjoy the creation that we have. Not that I believe in God, but that idea resonates a little bit more with me. Like the hedonism of this film, like it balances that narrative that I don't know, that I'm more used to consuming otherwise.
Well, Davey, there's gods for that. There are gods of just devouring and consumption.
Yeah.
Himeros is kind of close.
Yeah.
We're going there in January.
Is it Himeros?
We're doing,
Oh, yeah, you're going to Greece.
yeah, we're doing a project in Greece
Yeah.
on gods and
Dionysus,
goddesses and
yeah.
archetypes. But yeah.
Dionysus.
And then I'll read one more. Brock B says, a great scene. Kudos to Alex and Gabriel for being able to perform what appeared to be a very cold environment. Being able to see Alex's breath and the steam coming off of Gabriel's cock when it came out of Alex's mouth is truly going above and beyond. But in spite of it all, Alex really embodied having permission to please Gabriel, and great cameo appearances by Finn and Davey. But my eyes must have been playing tricks on me because I swear I saw Finn take a bite of cake. All joking aside, crazy. It wasn't a bite of cake. It was like, we pounded these desserts, and there was a local bakery that was like 15 minutes away, and so I drove off to like get this like massive order of like cakes and pastries and eclairs. Oh my god, I could jerk off
They're
to
probably
that.
so grateful.
Yeah, it was really.
Like, what was the last time they got like a giant order? They probably were so grateful.
They probably thought it was a wedding. They were probably like, "What? Like, what are these people doing?"
It was. It's the sacred and the
Do we have time for
profane.
one more comment? This one's juicy.
Okay.
Totally.
You,
I do.
Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this is HJR2209 says, that was fun. Takes me back to when I was a teenager and I dropped something on the floor at a friend's house. And when I went under the table, his big brother only had on white underwear and I could see the outline of his cock and balls. And I probably stayed down there for way too long because I was mesmerized. Again, your videos are beautifully made and the concept was really cute. Thanks. That's like another hot video we can do.
That's awesome. Yeah. I can't
Yeah.
find my pencil.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the associations that people have with it, and like kind of going back and being able to like, okay, I'm safe now. Assuming that, I'm in a place where I'm watching Himeros TV and watching this video, and so maybe my assumption is that that person is in a safe space, and then they have these associations for back when it may not have been, and I hope that connection for those of us that get to have those makes it, casts it into a better place within our psyche, perhaps. I think it's cool.
The comments on Himeros TV are awesome. I love the feedback that we get. Worth the price of admission. Actually, you can see those for free. You don't even have to sign up. You can just click on the trailers and still enjoy them. All right, so we'll leave it there. Next week we are discussing Skip the Kiss. Finn, where can people get more of you?
My website, finndeerhart.com, FINNDEERHART.
LeoRising.
You can join me on the podcast. I'll see you there.
Matthew, where can people get more of you?
Matthew Clark Davison, DAVISON.com.
And also, can we see the book one more time? I think you have it handy, right?
Yeah, I do. I have it.
Doubting Thomas.
Beautiful cover.
Where should people buy it?
The best place to buy it, of course, is in a local bookstore if you can. But if you, every place has it. But there are signed copies at Powell's Books, I think, and Powell's ships anywhere in the world. So if you go to powells.com and then put in Doubting Thomas or Matthew Clark Davison, it'll come right up.
Awesome. And remember, you can join Himeros.tv and save 20% at Himeros.tv/pod. Gotta pet all my shit. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, more to come.